Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Aliens Fireteam Elite. I played it on the Xbox Series X. It's also available for the Xbox Series S, Xbox One, PS4, PS5, and PC. So let's start with the story. You play as Mr. or Mrs. Nameless Colonial Marine. You are out in the edges of space investigating a ship called the Katanga. It's a big ass ship that may or may not be infested by aliens. You know, good old xenomorphs. And it happens to be hovering around the planet LV-895. Well, I guess moon, planetoid, something like that. And of course, you know, there's kind of pretty traditional aliens story stuff going on. I'm not going to go overly deep into it, but you do go down to LV-895 at one point and find out what's going on down there, as well as what is going on, you know, the ship. Now, there's not really a colorful cast of characters. They try to inject as much personality into each of them as they can, but they just don't really do that great of a job with it. They follow pretty much the stereotypes you would anticipate the characters to follow. Also, before I wrap up the story part, I would like to say that I think they do some interesting things, and they really do some cool stuff with, like, lore in the alien universe of explaining, like, corporations and stuff on the human side. I know with, like, the movies Prometheus and, like, what was it, Alien Covenant, they tried to explain more of, like, the alien stuff, but, like, this game actually adds some, like, human lore, and I thought that was cool. Now let's get into the audio, and the first thing I'm going to say is the sound effects in this game are awesome. They really do take you back to, you know, classic Alien, classic Aliens. The sound of the weapons, the sound of the xenomorphs, they do a good job with that. And I gotta say, the music is, you know, when it's playing, it's definitely good, but when I was first thinking about it, I had kind of forgotten that there was music in this game. I had to really pay attention to the fact that there is music in this game to realize there's music in this game. So that's not really a good thing. And then when I was paying attention to it, I was like, oh, this does fit. This does feel like good alien music. But for some reason, it's not a score that really stuck with me. So when it comes to the voiceover work, I actually think it's better than I was expecting, but I'm going to go a little into visuals right here and say it's weird because none of the characters' lips move. They're just kind of standing there in front of you. They may move a little bit. So it'd basically be like if I was talking like I am right now, but then all you're seeing on screen is, you know, this. But probably even less animated as I recall it. Now let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is where I just can't fucking deal with this game, honestly. So first off, this is a co-op shooter RPG, basically. And the first thing I ran into was the sheer volume of xenomorphs. It's oversaturating to the point where you kind of get bored of killing xenomorphs in that first mission, and there are some enemies later, different enemies, they start to mix it up. But even then, there's just so many of them that it starts to kind of play itself out because everything feels exactly the same. Now, admittedly, in each mission there can be small variations, like, oh, maybe you have to go over here and grab this one thing, but at the end of the day, they are still very linear. This game would really benefit from being much more procedurally generated. But on top of that, one thing that really did piss me off, and it was the only way I could really make any progress playing solo, and I will get into that in a moment, is that I had to turn down the difficulty to easy from medium, or casual from standard. And the reason being is because it's a co-op game and I literally couldn't find anyone to play with. In the entire time of trying, every single level I played in a public server so that I could play with other people, or at least attempt to. And for the first, like, 3 days this game was out, every time I tried, I would just get a message saying that the, like, lobby was full or some shit. Every time. Like, it didn't even matter. It wouldn't even let me, like, actually attempt to play a public match. I would just get this error. Then they released an update that would allow me to try, and it still didn't work. Because you can't join a random level. You have to pick your level, so you need players playing that level. You have to select your specific difficulty. The other players that you're looking for have to be wanting to play that difficulty and have their settings to that difficulty. You have to either enable or disable challenge cards, and the players that are going to join you have to have basically the exact same settings you do. Level, difficulty, and challenge cards on. And I found basically nobody with the exact same settings, ever. That's not entirely accurate. I did find one person and he quit before between the lobby screen and the game actually starting, he quit. So I had to rely on the AI bots, which, if you're playing on casual mode, yeah, they do pretty well. They do well enough. And if you're playing on standard, they do well enough for the first 2 missions in a chapter, but the 3rd mission in a chapter is always way harder than the first 2, and the AI bots are not aggressive enough, they are not mobile enough, and they don't react fast enough to get you through. They won't follow you around and cover your ass when you're the only one who can interact with the objects to complete the mission. So that is why I had to turn it down to casual difficulty, which that pisses me off. Because quite frankly, the bots should be good enough to get me through medium difficulty. Like, I understand needing a party of actual players to get through like hard or a higher difficulty than that, but it's fucking standard difficulty. Come on, guys. And the big difference that I noticed is A, everything takes more bullets to kill in standard, and B, the number of like super enemies that come in. So that was really frustrating for me for all of the reasons. A, I shouldn't have to bring down my difficulty. B, the fact that I couldn't fucking find anyone to play with. And I actually had a friend who offered to pick up the game to play along with me so that I could progress through this, and I told him no. So me saying that already kind of tells you where this is going. Now, I mentioned earlier the sheer volume of xenomorphs and enemies in general just kind of gets oversaturating and it starts to wear the game down personally. And it's not just like you go to the objective, you start the objective and a horde comes, kind of like we expect from similar games like Left 4 Dead, but it's everywhere you go. And this doesn't have the AI director like Left 4 Dead to make it like different every time you play the game. It's really the same every time you go through a level. But while you're traveling, if you take the slightest of breaks, you're going to get attacked by xenomorphs 12+ times. Now, let's get back into why I couldn't co-op with somebody and like how that's so broken, because it's not like Borderlands and Gears of War haven't already figured this out. You can have people in Gears of War playing on the hardest difficulty while you're playing on medium. Borderlands, if you've got a guy who's a level 50 and you're a level 20, the enemies balance out. So there are ways to do this, as well as you should have the ability to just say join any mission, but no, that's not there. Another thing that would benefit this game is if you could change the classes of the AIs, because there are multiple classes to play as. I personally like the, Demolisher. I love the smart gun, what can I say? But they're all just riflemen. You can't change one to a medic or a technician or another Demolisher. So you can't even make the AI bots more useful to you. Then there are some RPG elements, like you level up your guns the more you use a gun. You can also add attachments to the guns. But the way you level, like leveling just unlocks these slots that you can plug little things that will help boost your character into. But a lot of them aren't particularly useful, so leveling up your character isn't a big deal, and it's not like it increases your health, it doesn't increase your defense, it doesn't increase things like that. To put it simply, this game just kind of falls apart in the gameplay element, and while it became more tolerable playing on casual difficulty, I shouldn't have had to do that to begin with. But let's get into the controls as well, and you know, the controls are actually pretty good. I think they work well. I don't know what else I have to say about that. They work well, they respond well, the camera works well. Unfortunately, what you're interacting with is trash. Now let's get into the graphics and visuals, and I'm gonna say this. I'm actually impressed with how it looks. I think they did a great job really capturing the visual style of the Aliens movie, as well as like it, you know, the planet they go to is very Prometheus inspired, and you know, it captures that so very well. I think the xenomorph designs are really well done. I think they're a little boring though, because you know, xenomorphs are pretty uniform in appearance, so that does get a little played out. Even with the different enemies, they all have the same design. It feels kind of lazy, there's not enough variety there. While it does capture the visual style, it could use some variety. As for the gear that your characters use, I think it definitely fits well in that visual style, but graphically, it's better than, you know, some indie games I've seen out there. I know this isn't 100% indie, but like, this isn't a big AAA developer. But it's also not the most beautiful game I've ever seen, and I'm quite sure it's not going to hold up graphically over time. It will wear down because it is trying to be a very realistic looking style, and while it does look pretty good, it's not going to look that good in 5 or 10 years, you know? Now let's get into the glitches that I ran into, like how the screen for just a frame or two will flash white, and it will just keep doing that until you fully reset the game. And that gets annoying. I don't know why it does that. I don't care why it does that. It's awful. Or I had a great glitch where my AI bots, they would fight, but they wouldn't follow me anywhere. They would get randomly teleported to me after they were like, 50 feet or whatever away, but that doesn't do me a lot of good. And then one of my favorite glitches, I had to mute the fucking game because this one sound effect just kept playing on repeat, and I'm gonna play that sound effect while I'm talking about this issue happening. So you'll understand what I was dealing with, why I had to mute the game. It was awful. I don't know why it happened, don't care why it happened, it happened. And last but not least, the game crashed a few times on me. But let's get into the wrap up. Simply, they do a pretty good job with the story, they do a pretty good job with the audio, and they do a pretty good job matching the visual styles of the Alien franchise. But the gameplay just falls apart. It's a co-op game where you can't get anyone to play with unless you already have friends who have the game, which I wouldn't put any of my friends through. They don't do enough to make it unique. They don't do enough to balance the game. It's not good. The things that are good in this game are really kind of superficial things, but what really matters for gameplay is just not there. It doesn't work well. It's trash. So to put it simply, I don't recommend this game. If you're wondering what I'm going to do with my copy, I'm going to sell it back to GameStop. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, how many of the Alien movies do you think are actually good? I'm saying it's 2. It's 1 and 2. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.